Hello, welcome to another episode of the Magic Hour. I'm your host, Majid and Dairy, aka Magic Lab. Be sure to subscribe and follow me on my YouTube at Majid and Dairy or on Facebook, or on my Instagram at Fame Film Agency. Today we have a returning guest, Mr. Stasi. How you doing?
Hey, Majid, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining me today. It's been a while. Hope you had a good Easter weekend.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the public holiday.
Oh yeah, aren't we all? A lot of crazy stuff has been happening lately. We've had oh God, too much to fill in this 1 hour. So one thing that I want to talk about first is the tariff war, if that's what they're calling it right now. They're calling it the tariff trade war, where China is no longer going to cave in to USA's demands, despite how strong Trump tried to put China down to its knees, do what they want. When they refused, Trump went from 145% tariffs to 245% tariffs, to the point where just the Chinese just basically told them, "Fuck off." That's basically what happened in the most convenient way. I mean, that's the best way I can explain it. What do you think is going on with this whole tariff war? What do you think of China's response?
Well, I feel like that's two parts because the tariffs didn't just affect China. But what's going on is Trump's trying to rebalance America's trade and economy, and he's approached it in a sort of disorganized way. Maybe he didn't want it to get watered down, so he thought he'd just cut the ripcord in a not properly prepared way. And China's not back down. China's not really doesn't want to be seen as a country that backs down easily. It's not like Japan that's dependent on the US military. So it's able to say no. And it's been doing that more and more for quite some time. And it's
E-
made America very uncomfortable.
Even Japan is kind of following China's example. They said that they want to drop their debt to the states. I read an article. I read a headline, not the
But
entire
have they
article.
done it?
I don't know if they, but they made a statement that they're going to. So I think China kind of maybe inspired them to do something, because one of the Chinese ministers said that we've been around for 5,000 years, and we're going to still be here 5,000 years from now. Like, we don't need you. We don't need America. We never needed you before, so we don't need you now, and we're not going to need you in the future. How do you think this has affected um, America's point of view on things, particularly from the political point of view, from the White House point of view? What do you think is going on in their brains right now after having seen this guy basically shut them down?
Well, essentially they caved, which that's what they did. Um, they ended the tariffs on certain, you know, tech imports. That's because that's what Trump's donors really wanted, and the rest of the economy is secondary. And China basically won that bout. Trump gave in, and once tariffs on China are at over 120%, it doesn't make much difference if you raise them from 150 to 180 to 200.
Mm.
That's just Trump throwing out numbers and trying to look tough. But he'd already played that card. China did it back to him. And now China's in the position where they can retaliate to the US economically, and everyone in the world, and even within Donald Trump's own party, will seek to blame him, or they'll blame his key economic advisors. They're having a lot of infighting about it. There's no public infighting from China about this. Um, and yeah, that's where it's at right now. China's in the position as well where people talk about China maybe selling US government bonds, and that's something that would really hurt the US, which China probably doesn't want to do. But they're also in the position to actually make it even harder for the US to get stuff from China, particularly rare earth minerals. And that would be really bad for the US tech industry, and they're really bad for the US military. And that's probably a big part of the reason why Trump caved into them.
Mm. Well, you can't help but think how genius China is acting in this way, because, like, even the regular Chinese locals, the citizens, they are still doing online business, selling things directly to American citizens. Like they even created boycott China T-shirts. They- this is what made me laugh. They're creating boycott China T-shirts made in China, and USA are buying them to boycott China, which is I think is hysterical. But even with this tariff war, this has benefited the rich, the 1% rich people in the USA. Haven't they been making millions out of this? Whereas the citizens are suffering more, but the rich are getting richer from this.
To some extent, yeah. I think it's Trump's way to sort of punish a lot of those former supporters of his that were not so loyal,
Uh,
and get over some potentially savvy younger people who are not as affected by this stuff because they expect the market to recover, and they'll seek to buy up a sort of new like young reckless male group of supporters is something that Trump's trying pretty hard to cultivate. And for the 1%, yeah, you're definitely right. I mean, they lose, but then they also gain.
yeah,
And I think Trump is also trying in some way to manipulate things. So, and this is always how it's been, right? To have those people in his favor, on his side, who have, given him money or given him legitimacy, which is quite a lot of them, get rewarded by his policies and by his decisions and get insider scoops. And those who try to stand up to him, he tries to punish and he tries to leave him out of this insider trading. Even his regular supporters, he tells them when to buy the dip. That's
that's
what
insider trading.
No, that's outsider
That's
trading.
trading.
He
Oh
invented
God.
that.
Oh, okay. Um, uh, isn't that punishable by law?
Well, it should be, but who's going to enforce these laws on the president?
Well, okay, because he's basically the lawmaker at this point. He can pardon himself. He can acquit himself from any crime that he's done before his presidency is over. A lot of people
Not
are
exactly.
well,
It'd be hard for him to, but it'd also be hard for the Supreme Court to bring it to him.
but during his presidency now, I'm sure he's going to be he's going to be covering all bases by making connections with all the people that are in power after he's gone to have to maintain a decent friendship slash relationship so they can help him off later on. And like I think he's kind of trying to cover his all bases for him not to be indicted or convicted after his presidency, because I'm sure that once his presidency is over, he's going to be sanctioned left, right, and center.
Well, he's quite old and he's not always the best long term thinker. He's a very crisis management, instant gratification kind of person. So it's hard to say for sure, but there is definitely some sort of constitutional crisis looming. But it might not necessarily be over this. But knowing Trump and knowing and seeing the way the government's going now and the level of control and centralization he has compared to last time, it's probably inevitable at some stage, especially when, if and when the Democrats make gains in Congress.
Well, I guess time will tell on that one. I mean, he has handled things immaturely, and I think it's very vindictive for him to have such a vendetta type uh, attitude and response to a lot of the stuff that he's doing. But one of the things that I think that he did do right, which is the which is the first and only smart thing he's done, was he didn't give in to Israel's manipulation for USA to invade Iran, to invade their supposed nuclear sites. The way Israel manipulated USA after the 9/11 attacks to invade Iraq, USA ate that like they were drawn to that like a moth to a flame. Like Netanyahu manipulated them so easily, but they weren't successful this time. Why do you suppose that is? What do you think made Trump say no? We're gonna talk first.
Because I guess, unlike 9/11, October 7 was more of an Israeli crisis. So it's not America's first-hand experience to try to, or even Americans' first-hand experience to try to madly react to this like they were after 9/11. After 9/11, George Bush was looking for somewhere to go, someone to scapegoat. The
Somebody to
Afghanistan
blame finally, yeah.
the Afghanistan war wasn't going that well. It was always going to be a hard war. It's not an easy place to fight. So he thought he would try somewhere with less strategic depth, a less or geographically organic country, one whose borders were drawn by Europeans, and he went after Iraq, a an aspiring power at the time that had been weakened by the policies of um, his father's administration and Bill Clinton's administration, and a country that was for a long time a US client state. So it was a country that was dependent on the US, and then it was being attacked by the US. Whereas Iran wasn't ever really in that position. So that makes it a lot harder. Also, and anyone who is serious about geopolitics would understand that a war with Iran would be very difficult, especially the kind of a occupation style war like happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. Iran is a lot more like Afghanistan in that sense. It's got more natural boundaries. It's got a stronger defense. It's got a more, in relative terms, especially around the concept of the nation, a more united population in that sense. They're divided on a lot of other things. And also, I think in terms of what groups that are against the government in Iran want, I don't think that they're after nukes. So they'd probably also be telling the US there might be some cult movements out there, but most Iranian groups, even ones that are against the government of Iran, would probably want some sort of different approach. And even these war hawks, they sort of talk about the Iranian people like they're on their side. And there is some truth, which is that people in Iran are not anti-Americans. But they are quite against the American government.
Yeah,
But
well,
that's two different things.
I mean, even a lot of Australians will think they don't agree with what the American government is doing. That doesn't necessarily make them a threat. Israel's excuse is like, they want to stop them from developing nuclear. They want to stop their nuclear program, which is a very similar argument that they had that when they said about Saddam Hussein in Iraq, that they have weapons of mass destruction, which is a threat to us, our national security, which is a threat to us all, which ended up being one of the most biggest lies ever told, ever enforced on the population. And this is not working for Israel's need to want to have Iran invaded. So Israel is trying to invade now. That they are wanting to invade Iran without U.S. approval. Now, let's say they actually do. They send planes and they drop bombs or whatever, and then Iran somehow does retaliate. There's going to be an interference. America's going to be suckered into it, whether they like it or not, because of their blind allegiance to a country that bleeds them dry on a daily basis.
Maybe.
You reckon?
But Trump's government and support is a cult in and of itself. So if he says no, they will all follow him.
You reckon? Do you think Israel will follow? Because normally Israel calls all the shots. Netanyahu is the one that generally calls the shots.
It was Ronald Reagan that made Israel withdraw from Lebanon. It wasn't Israel that did that on its own accord.
Ronald Reagan was one of the very few presidents that actually stood up to Israeli policy and he basically shut them down. Him and Carter did the same thing, which is why Carter was only a one-term president. And they did try to kill Reagan. Reagan did get away. I mean, we don't know who. But I know they found the shooters and everything like that. But who knows who could have orchestrated that hit? I mean, there were even rumors saying how JFK wanted to focus on the whole Israel-Palestine thing, that Palestine belongs to the Palestinians. And less than 2 weeks after he making that statement, he was gone. Coincidence? I know this is just speculation and just theory talk. But but if you put it all together, it kind of makes sense. Like any.
I don't really believe that will always fits. Every president somewhere at some point has some sort of an argument with Israel. Usually it's pretty symbolic. In the past, it was about trying to cajole them to sort of try something that resembles a two-state solution, but isn't.
Yeah.
Now we see them occasionally get told not to start World War III. That's the bar has slipped, but there is some tension happening, and it does leave a lot of people feeling like Israel controls the US. But we had this disagreement last time. I think Israel is America's unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Middle East, and right now it's more turbulent and choppier than ever.
Okay. Well, I hope you're right. I would like to believe what you're saying is true, and I hope that I'm very, very wrong. But I honestly believe that Israel has more of a stronghold on USA than most people would like to admit. You don't think that Israel is trying to bite off more than it can chew because they've been saying now, and they've been wanting to accomplish to occupy parts of Lebanon and all of Syria on top of their occupation of Gaza and now the West Bank. And they said that they're not going to stop. They're saying stopping the war on Gaza will be like surrendering.
What they say and what they do doesn't always match. So whether or not there's hope in a peace agreement happening, it's hard to say for sure. But I'm more optimistic than I was about it last year.
You are?
That doesn't mean that it's going to be a just peace or some sort of solution, but I think that chances of a ceasefire, maybe somewhere on the line, are closer now. It does seem that, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems that Trump's administration is a little bit more serious about it than Biden's administration.
Oh, Biden just enabled. Biden just let them do basically whatever they wanted.
Well, that's what would you expect from an 80-year-old president who constantly talks about the past, who'll think in frames and terms and references of the past when he's thinking.
Yeah. Well, that's why I believe America needs to change their policy and never elect anybody who's over the age of 65, to be able to do stuff like that. But
well, if America's ever going to get better in any way, they need to elect someone that's not a Democrat and that's not a Republican.
They need to, but we need new young blood. I'm not talking about young as in their 20s or 30s, but at least in their 40s or mid-40s. You need somebody with a new vision.
If they come through the same political machines and structures, then they'll go through the same rotten decline.
Well, most likely. But what do you think about the ICJ's rule of not wanting to sanction now? They're not going to follow on the arrest with Netanyahu until January of 2026. They've paused the warrant, the arrest warrant.
Well, this was in large part because of the appointment of the Ugandan justice as president of the ICJ instead of Nawaf Salam, the now Prime Minister of Lebanon. I wonder if it really was such a good idea to appoint him as Prime Minister of Lebanon for that reason. Although he does seem to have some authority in the country internally, but at the cost of Palestine, was there no one else that they could have appointed?
Well, it's always going to be. Well, they haven't had a government in God knows how many years because Hezbollah were calling all the shots. But at least this way, they managed to dismantle a lot of Hezbollah's influence in Lebanon. They're confiscating their weapons. They lost their leader. The current leader is not as strong as the Nasrallah was.
But without Hezbollah, Lebanon stands a serious possibility of it being attacked by foreign fighters from Syria.
Not necessarily, because USA and Lebanon and the Lebanese army and the Lebanese government, they do have a deal with each other. USA did say they will protect them to a certain extent because Hezbollah was the reason why Israel thinks all of Lebanon is a threat.
Well, how good is the USA's promises?
Oh no, it doesn't. When it comes to the Middle East, their promises don't mean nothing. But they have had past deals with Lebanon before, because Lebanon has been under a certain amount of protection, which is why Israel were hesitant to want to occupy. If Israel wanted to occupy Lebanon, they could easily do so. They could if they wanted to. But there has been restrictions. The USA basically said, you know what? If you want to occupy Lebanon, occupy certain parts. Don't go after the whole thing.
I don't believe that Israel could actually seriously occupy that much more of Lebanon.
Oh no, not now. But if they wanted to, they could definitely get the assistance to do.
From the United States.
If they wanted to, if the USA was to give in, they will.
And piss off every Maronite.
Yes,
from here to
Israel's goal is not just to have Palestine. If they did accomplish having all of Palestine, having all of the West Bank, do you think they're going to stop there? They'll go after Jordan.
Sure,
they'll go after Syria. They'll go after Lebanon.
It wouldn't be wise strategically to go there first. But going back to the ICJ and international bodies like the UN, you got to remember, not necessarily the ICJ, but the UN with their partition plan was the one that got us into this mess, and they got the Palestinian people into this mess. And it's incumbent on them to do more to get them out. A lot of people like patting the UN on the back because the US yells at them and they feel sorry for them. But the UN and international institutions have actually either got to fulfill their mandate or they may as well just give up. Take off the robes, go get a proper job, because they need to enforce international law and justice to the most basic extent, especially where it's because of them. This isn't some abstract conflict in some sort of very isolated part of the world where the UN hasn't managed to even send anyone yet to monitor. This is one of the first things they've done, and it's plagued and weakened and undermined the UN, international courts, and international law for the past 80 years.
That's a lot of time. That's almost around the same time when Israel became a country. Didn't they kick USA out? Or sorry, didn't they? Didn't Israel decide to leave the UN?
No, it's probably the International Criminal Court you're thinking of, if they were ever a part of it, which I probably doubt. But they probably had some sort of more observer, maybe signed but not ratified but not signed kind of nonsense with it, which from memory, pretty sure they left when the PLO was allowed to represent Palestine.
Palestine, of course. And yeah, it's amazing how they're never ever going to let that go. I mean, like not long ago, where Israel attacked these medical workers in ambulances, and they basically slaughtered them all. And to hide the evidence, they buried the bodies and they buried the ambulances, thinking that nobody was going to find them until a party did find them, in which Israel confessed to the crimes, but they said they were under attack by these medical workers in ambulances. So Israel was acting on self-defense. I mean, why do you think it's so? They believe that we will swallow these lies so easily. I mean, and they've been caught on lies so many times. I mean, come on.
Because there's a lot of people that do. Because there's a lot of politicians that do. Because there's a lot of business people. Because there's a lot of old people stuck in the past. Because there's a lot of people who have made this career choice in whatever political or business setting. And there's a lot of people that are highly motivated to reason backwards from their values or their beliefs or their trust in Israel or the West or something like that. But I think and it's not just this, this horrible thing that's happened. It's consistent with their conduct in this war and in previous wars and conflicts with Palestinian groups, with Palestinian civilians. I mean, that's not a conflict. That's not a war. That's just a genocide. But what their actions do is legitimize the targeting of health workers, health institutions everywhere. I mean, they do that with journalists as well, and they've been doing it for a while. But this is the next step. And if you work in health, whether it's in Australia, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in Venezuela, whether it's in, Iran even, this is one step to normalizing putting a target on your back in the event of a war. I would have liked to hope that if World War III was to break out, they wouldn't be bombing the hospitals.
No, of course not. I mean,
But
but they will.
Well,
I mean,
quite likely.
Israel has killed more journalists than any other people who have documented other
I
wars.
think it depends as well on how much they're punished for this in the long run.
Do you think they will be punished? I mean, they've managed to be able to get away unscathed with a lot of their crimes. I mean, we're not just talking about killing aid workers. We're talking about how they use even rape as a weapon of war, starvation, cutting off electricity, cutting off water. Almost every hospital, even the ones that are not 100% functioning hospitals, have been destroyed. Do you think somebody is keeping tabs besides other journalists that have died? Do you think there's a company or somebody that's keeping tabs of all the crimes, they're listing them and naming who was responsible? Do you think that would ever come back to bite them in the ass when all of this is over?
Absolutely.
Do you really think so?
Absolutely. It just
You don't think
depends.
they'll have full protection?
It depends how hard. I mean, in life, you're never fully protected. They're not. The Iron Dome is not the magic force field they think it is.
No. But I'm talking about when the smoke finally clears, and people rise up. These people, including the soldiers, not just the major politicians like Netanyahu and Ben Giver and all these people that perpetrated everything, but even the soldiers, because there are so many stories to be told that we don't even know of. But people are hoping they are documenting all of this stuff. Do you think when the smoke clears and everything's done, that they will start going after them? Okay, you did this at this date. You did this at that date. This is punishable by life in prison, or this is a death penalty punishment. Do you think they will finally suffer the repercussions of their crimes?
Well, I do think that they will, at the very least, have some real serious inconveniences. But I do hope that international law is restored and that, yeah, I mean, these people get what's coming in terms of being taken to court, in terms of being punished, in terms of being evicted from illegal settlements, and in terms of a lot of other things too.
Inshallah. Do you think this is the closest we've ever come to a World War III in recent memory?
I don't. I don't know. I don't really feel like that's exactly what's coming up right now, but there's definitely very concerning escalations in tensions and in behavior and in norms. I mean, we talked about international law being weakened even more. I mean, it wasn't very strong to begin with. And we're seeing very aggressive actions. We're seeing, America become a more, totalitarian kind of society gradually, but less gradually than people are comfortable with. And, we're seeing Russia and China becoming a lot more defensive. And they're not alone. But I don't think that the will is there. I think the hostility is there. I think the world's sort of changed. People are more developed. But, 2 or 3 things go wrong. And it's it could happen.
You don't think that it would be time for a war? I mean, I'm not pro-war at all. I'm not pro-war. But I honestly believe World War III...
No one says that they're pro-war.
No. I honestly... Well, there are pro-war people and pro-war countries. I personally believe World War III has come and gone with the sake of what happened in Iraq and what happened in Afghanistan, all that kind of stuff. But... even like with mob bosses, with mafia bosses, they when they're doing business for so long, things get really, really bad. They call it going to the mattresses when they are going to war. And they say this has to happen from time to time. It helps get rid of the bad blood. This is what they say. This needs to happen from time to time. All businesses eventually lead to war to get rid of the negativity that was ruining our business. And I kind of see how this can also happen with countries. They think, okay, we have to get rid of some bad blood because it is affecting our business.
I mean, I think the likelihood of war is increasing, but World War III, I'm not as sure. I mean, the severing of international trade relations makes that a a little bit more likely, but seeing how quickly Trump caved into China and even the EU, I'm not quite so sure.
Do you think he caved in so easily because the Chinese made a statement saying that we are prepared to fight, whether it's trade war, whether it's global war, whether it's an actual war, we are ready to fight till the end?
I
Do you
don't,
think that kind of do you think that kind of put a Bunsen burner under his ass to think, oh shit, we should
I
stop?
don't think that it was because of wolf warrior diplomacy. I mean, that was something that China used to shore up their position, but I think it was more to do with internal pressures. I think though we talked about Trump caving into China, and like sometimes America is going to take a knell against another, reasonably sized world power, especially one that's powerful, quite functional, got so many people. I don't actually think it's that embarrassing. I think them caving to the EU, which is not as talked about because it would be too humiliating, is what's really funny. So when the EU threatened to tariff back America, then they decided they'd focus on China and they dropped their tariffs down to 10%. But first of all, Trump and his administration made a whole thing about standing up to the EU, and now they sort of gave up to them. And the EU is what? Like a union of countries, half of them are tiny, most of them dysfunctional. Like the only really like powerful countries there militarily is France and economically is Germany. So although the latter maybe not so much anymore. So how did this sort of dysfunctional alliance of bankers that controls all these minor countries, which together do amount to something, manage to stand up to the United States? Like I'm Greek, we've got no love lost for the EU, but it's almost impressive. Like I thought the EU was too incompetent to do something like that.
Well, has America finally shown some of its weakness, and the EU people like the EU are exposing it?
Potentially.
Is that why the USA is having such difficulty with them?
But the EU is still very wedded to the USA. Maybe we'll see them change. But if people who think that all these problems are just because of Trump, and then when Trump goes away, this will go away, will pull themselves back into this scenario again in the future when some other Republican comes in, or maybe even when a Democrat might start acting a bit like this. I mean, really, for quite a while, America has been neglecting Europe's interests. I mean, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan we talked about before were a lot more damaging to Europe. But even further than that, America's involvement in places like Libya, in Syria, has been very reckless and even more dangerous to Europe. It's right on its periphery. And America has been so reckless because it wasn't affected directly. Now, Trump was almost a good thing there because he slowed that down a little bit. But I think that this is more of an American thing.
Okay, well now let's talk about the Australian thing, since we're in Australia. How we got upcoming elections between the two candidates, Albanese, who wants to run for re-election, versus Dutton. Now, a lot of people are saying that Albanese and Labour, they are definitely the front runners, but most voters think that Australia is on the wrong track. Now, what do you think they mean by that?
Well, I think it means that Australia is becoming a more unequal, more unaffordable society.
Unaffordable?
Yeah. I think that there's, class and generational conflict. I think that there's, sort of capitalist contradictions making it harder to seek out a living. I think just like in America and Europe, the middle class is in many ways being under attack by corporate interests in Australia. And the two parties are their main servants.
Well, there's no telling who will. Well, we can only speculate who. I mean, Albanese is probably sure to win, but it's just a speculation. If by some,
it's a pretty commonly held speculation.
It is. It's a speculation. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe Dutton will win, but I don't know. Dutton. Whenever I see this guy on TV and hear him talk, he just looks like one of those kids in high school that got beat up a lot for calling people wads. I mean, that's what he looks like to me. I mean, this is the man who wants to lower wages and get rid of super. I mean,
And get rid of work from home
get rid of
and
work from
fire
home.
government employees. Strange way to try to win people's votes, don't you reckon?
Well, normally you're supposed to tell people what they want to hear, then do whatever the hell you want once you get in office, right? That's how it generally works. You promise them the world and deliver nothing, and as long as you get in power, you can do whatever it is that you feel is
Well,
best.
that's right. I don't think that this is what people meant when they said they wanted honesty and integrity
Well,
in
at least
politics.
he's still being honest. I mean, at least we know his intentions. I mean, this is not necessarily a bad
Well,
thing.
Dewey, he took them all back, and he'll probably bring them all back again. He has done something which is I've not really don't feel like I've seen before, which is he went back on his main policy agendas surrounding, you know, jobs, which is something that's so important to people. Going back on work from home, going back on firing public servants, and I'm pretty sure maybe he went back on his statements about super as well, and it just makes me think, like, this isn't rookie stuff. This isn't, you know, peripheral. This is very important to a lot of people. So if he thinks he can make these weird declarations and then be forgiven for making a bit of a mistake. Oh, sorry, I proposed to ruin your life. Whoops, I got that one wrong. I won't do that. You can trust me. I mean, you got to be pretty thick to fall for that one.
Well, what is Albanese currently standing for? I mean, even when it came to the policies of recognizing Palestine as a state, they keep going back and forth because they're scared to make that final decision. Like he is nothing compared to his sister Francesca, who, I mean,
I believe they're in fact cousins.
are they cousins?
No, I was joking.
Okay, then. They are brother and sister, correct?
No,
Are they
they're
not? They're not related at all.
not at all. She's from Italy.
Yeah,
His dad was.
yeah, but there's no blood relation to them.
You think that would have been a lot more discussion about this?
Because everybody keeps telling me they're related, they're brother and sister. I was trying to look it up, and they have the same mother and father. I'm guessing they can't be.
They don't have the same mother and father.
Are you sure? I must have read different because I
You
read
definitely
something-
read different. She has an Italian accent. His father wasn't around.
Yeah, but okay, that's because she was raised there and he was raised here. I mean, I don't
No,
think it was separated by
it's not
birth or
true.
anything.
It's just not true.
All right.
I could promise you that.
Really?
It's not true.
Okay, well, I'm glad somebody finally clarified that for me because everybody that I've met saying, why can't he be more like his sister? And I was like, who the hell are you talking about? And Francesca, yeah, I've been seeing this woman. They share the same name, so everybody jumped to that conclusion. Now, like American politics, where Israel has a huge influence, because they have AIPAC, and they basically pay the candidate they want to be president. Do you think the same thing is happening here? Do you think there's an Israeli influence on who's going to be our next prime minister?
I think the influence of Israel in Australia mostly is done by proxy through America. I think it's America that pressures Australia to do that stuff, and Israel, when it comes to Australia, probably just mostly tries to make Australia say one thing or another, but it's America that really is the one putting pressure to make Australia do one thing.
At the behest of what Israel tells them to do.
Well, we've had the disagreement before over who tells who to do what. I mean, I think America's run by corporations, not a foreign government.
Yeah.
And I think Israel's run through them indirectly. Now, as for, Albanese going back and things, politicians do that stuff a lot and they get away with it, especially when it's something the public is not well versed about and there's not a strong campaign to expose it. And look, there's definitely strong campaigns to expose Albanese and the government on Palestine, but the Palestine movement's got a lot of priorities and it can't always stick to whatever Anthony Albanese has said and done and how consistent Labor is. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that and they definitely are throwing at that, but they're also doing other things. And it's not as central to Labor's policy platform, even though morally it is a bit more important. I mean, I would be, I wouldn't be affected by this, but a lot of Dunnan's weird ideas would probably affect me more directly. But, obviously the major parties, apparently slavish devotion to Israel, although Labor seems a bit more reluctant. and sort of gets away with it a bit more in that sense, it's wrong. And it's one other reason, part of Australia's entanglement with America, that Australians feel like this country is going in the wrong direction. But I think with Albo's double takes, they're more strategic. He's this kind of guy that seems to appease both sides of an issue, whereas Peter Dutton's kind of guy that seems to be pissing off both sides of an issue. I mean, he's probably losing votes to Trump at a Patriot and One Nation, perhaps, or maybe they're taking votes off of Labor, but he is weakened his position quite a lot over the course of this campaign, whereas Albo's or Albanese Albo. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
why.
an Australian thing. People cut down names, make it sound more Aussie.
I don't want to do it because I feel like that's what he would like. He seems to be a lot better at playing it both ways. He's with unions, but he's also with businesses. I mean, is he really with the union members? He's with immigrants, but he's also with essentially like the racist state. He's with says he's with young people, but also he's with landowners and wants property prices to rise. He smooths over these contradictions a lot better than Peter Dutton.
Okay. See, I've been out of the country for 16 years. I've only been back now for a year, so I wasn't here when he got elected. But has he fulfilled his his policies, what he said what he was going to do for the country? Did he follow through in a good way, or did he go back on a lot of what he said?
Well, he didn't really have a very ambitious agenda to begin with, and that's probably part of the reason why. So then he wouldn't really be held that much to account to. I mean, there's a lot of areas, on corruption, on integrity, on climate change, that that you could probably quite flagrantly say he didn't stack up. I think Israel and Palestine sort of came up a lot stronger as an issue during his government. But who knows what he would have been, how he would have talked about it if it was at a different point in his term, but it probably wouldn't have been that different. Now, I do think that he was elected to be a safe pair of hands, and for the political class and the capitalist class, and even for some of Australia's more comfortable, well-off professionals, he has done that, and they might reward him for it.
Do you think Australia would be better off if he was re-elected as opposed to Dutton should he win? Do you think things would get better or worse?
I think that the thing that would make things better in Australia would be minority government. And I think, while Labor majority is much better than Dutton's majority, which is scary to think about, I think that if people get around too much to support a Labor majority government, then it will take a long time for anything to seriously improve. And in some areas, it might even go backwards. I mean, I'm hoping not. I'm hoping for a strong result from third parties and independents. Not all the third parties. But if that doesn't materialize, if there's some sort of disorganized, if there's too much Labor mania, the way that there is sort of mania around the new Prime Minister in Canada who, might be a bit better than Albanese, we could be in a situation where, it's like another Biden presidency kind of thing in Australia without, the advanced age and mental problems. We'd have a government that runs on inertia, full of people that were elected in the 90s, whose frames of reference and view of the world is stuck with them, is stuck with the parliamentary body, stuck with the political and economic elite and the media, and it could make our democracy stale. But with Dutton, you have, maybe it's a little bit more dynamic, but it would just be destructive. A minority government, even if it's a Labor majority government, I feel like a Liberal minority government would be a little bit harder to understand what they would do. Will be the only way that there'll be enough pressure exerted on the Labor Party to actually do some good things. And but on the other hand, it's an opportunity, but it's also something that you don't want independents or Greens or whatever to make a mistake and not press hard enough. The thought of them just letting Labor get away with doing what they currently do and being tarred with that same brush is, it's a bit scary, because that would mean that the Liberals would be able to sort of say there is no alternative, which is something they're trying to do now, and it's not working out so well.
Well, I guess time will tell. When is the election day? When they decide? How far away are we?
I'm pretty sure it's March. Is
May.
May 3?
May the 3rd of May. Before May the 4th be with you. So may the 4th be with us on that day, to see what happens. Well, I remember one day when I was a kid, when they were doing elections, they were interviewing people on the street, and this one old man said something that stuck with everybody. He goes, "It doesn't matter who you vote for, they're going to get you." So either way, we're going to get got, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but let's hope that it's a good thing. Stasi, thank you so much for being a guest, appearing on the Magic Hour. I hope you guys tune in for another episode in the near future. Until then, peace out.